Hello again. Hi.
I'm going to continue with the subject of a kitchen still life, and I looked around my kitchen and I happen to love chocolate chip cookies, so I've been thinking about making them lately. So I ended up thinking, okay, I'm going to do some possibilities for chocolate chip cookie compositions. And on the Google Classroom, I will hopefully attach some of the variations of how I contemplated arranging everything on the page. I also have thought about just doing a simple coffee cup spoon, and you can see we have a pyramid composition where the focal point is at the top and then things are kind of aiming toward that. So, but I decided I'm going to stick with this. I won't be able to complete it on this little video, but I'll at least get it started for you. And then on the last video, remember we talked about how to do the 2-point perspective, which I'll have to deal with. And I might change it a little bit than the viewpoint that's on this photograph, because sometimes the camera will distort depending on how close you are. It might be a good idea to take your picture from a little farther away and then zoom and crop and edit. And then also, for sure, the bowl will be a cylinder. So I think I talked about doing thumbnail sketches. Let me get a dark pencil, and I'll use this one. And on a piece of newsprint, I'm going to do just a quick thumbnail or a quick preliminary drawing with gesture drawing. So you could do thumbnail sketches first, and we talked about that on the other video. So I'm thinking, I like the idea of having a lot of foreground. So rather than put my bowl way down here and have a lot of upper part, it's always good to give your viewer that foreground to lead them into the page. So I'm going to put the ellipse of the bowl a little higher up and a little to the right. So here's my ellipse of my bowl, and this is the gesture drawing. And here's the vertical axis of the bowl. And here's those stripes that are on the bowl. And I have a small version of that same bowl, so you can kind of see what we're looking at there. And then, this is the size of paper. I'm going to use a 1/4 sheet of hot press watercolor paper, because I know I'm going to use Pitt pen and watercolor. So I want that smooth surface for the Pitt pen. And then the baking soda is going to be a little bit to the left of it. So this, even though the camera distorted it a little bit, this is straight up and down. So I'm going to make my line straight up and down. These two lines are headed toward each other. This is going in the other direction. And this is vertical. And then I have some guidelines for the letterings, baking soda. So there's that. And then maybe I'll have the egg overlap it a little bit, but you got to be careful. If I overlap it too much, then it would look like it's floating in the air. It has to have enough room for the bulk of the air of the egg to be able to fit there. The lower something is on the picture plane, the closer it looks to us. So this egg here is that far from the picture plane. This egg here is that far, so it appears closer. So I'm going to add this egg over here, and I don't like it right underneath that, so maybe I'll move it over a little bit to the right, so it's not directly underneath the bowl. Here's the whisk, And here's the most important thing on the page, the package of chocolate chips. And it's okay to have it going off the page, and actually maybe instead of horizontal, maybe I'll have it going off at a little bit of an angle. And then of course those little precious chips are spilling out a little bit. This is the flour, gluten-free, some of you will be glad to know. And then anybody that likes to use gluten-free products might know about Bob's Red Mill. So I'm gonna show that famous label there. And it's, this is overlapping or underlapping, it's behind both of these things. So I have to be careful that the bottom of this is higher up because it shows it's farther back. If I made the bottom here, then it would look like the bowl is glued onto the side of the package of flour. So you kind of have to watch your placement on a still life. And then I would eventually put Bob's, and then Red Mill, and then the yellow pack. Now, most likely, if you have something like this, you might have some labels. And rather than get into how good am I at doing lettering, you can simplify. What if you just put that yellow, made that yellow, or just an outline, and then you can even scribble the lettering, and just put baking soda and then a few stripes. So that's all you really need to do. And then maybe a few indication put the word sweet and chips. So that's all you really need on that. Okay, now on the bowl, you're going to see that there's an edge here, and then there is another line that disappears inside. So I've got my my preliminary drawing scribbled on. The next step would be contour drawing. So I just was showing you how I might start, and I did get a little bit of this started here so that I'm really ready to do my my pen. And I have my different pens here ready to go. Now the other thing I mentioned is to maybe do a border. So I thought about it and maybe make it look like it's a entry into a sketchbook. And so I have it outlined, and you don't necessarily have to have a perfect ruler straight border. It could be hand drawn. You could have these sort of handwritten, so I might decide to put the words chocolate chip cookies. I added butter on there, and I actually got out a stick of butter and put it down there and looked at, took some photos of it and looked at how that would look. Okay, so what I finally think I decided is, I had even thought about making a little eraser stamp of a chocolate chip and having it stamp around the edges. I thought, that's too much trouble. So I'm gonna maybe just put a few little chocolate chips at each corner eventually. So now that I've got the gesture and the contour sort of drawn in there, I'm gonna clean it up now with the pen line and hope that I don't make a mistake on this ellipse, because I can't erase it. So just know that a human being drew this, and just do the best you can. And I'm also kind of squished in here because I'm doing a video, so I don't have my usual ability to squeeze in a certain angle here, but I'll do my best. And then I'll show you a little bit of color on here. Now I do have a white bowl, so it's fun to think about the values. You know, if I squint my eyes, I can see a really white line here and a white line here. And then this is in shadow. And then there's also probably a light coming this way a little bit more, and there's a cast shadow going up this way. So I can emphasize this side being a little more in shadow. And it doesn't, rather than using a flat gray, I like to mix my grays and put color in them. So I'll maybe put a little bit of the red, and then the complementary color of red is green, and add a little red and yellow and blue and make my gray that way. Also, because there's some shiny things, I might be getting some reflection of the red going on in there. So I'll start with my M Pitt pen, but it may end up looking a little too weak, so I might have to emphasize it a little bit more with one of the darker ones. Here goes nothing. Now I'm going to turn this as I draw it so that I'm getting a little more control over this curve as I pull it toward me. And I want to keep in mind that there is this imaginary line axis going this way, and this half and that half should be the same. Now I've got the whisk coming in here, so I should probably draw that right now so I know how far my my line of my bowl is going to be. Now this whisk has some little sort of textury lines, so I could add that. And then I've got this ring here. So I'm going a little slower when I do my contour drawing. And it should, again, look like a human being did it. So things can be a little wonky and not perfectly straight. Okay, so I kind of have a sense of where that is. I'll go up to that and then continue. Now I do have a double line here, and that's the thickness of that ceramic bowl. So I'm gonna do this, and it does, because as I'm closer to it here, that thickness gets a lot thinner on the other side. So it's going to get a little more narrow as I go around the back side of it. And I'm trying to do this in as one stroke as much as possible, resting my hand on the paper and just kind of moving. Instead of doing this, I'm kind of moving my whole hand. And you can see I've got it pretty good, but it's not perfect. That's okay. And then I want to do this line. But again, if you look at values, we've got white, gray, a white strip, and then a gray area. So this white strip is a double line also. So let's see here. I guess I'll do it this way. Trying to keep it fairly even. So there's that's going to indicate where the darks and lights are. Then we have the edge of the bowl, and it's pretty straight. It's a vertical line. So I'm going to make it go vertical. And then this follows the same curve as the bottom of the ellipse. And then the bottom of the bowl will also have that same curve. There's a little owie. And I'm going to be okay about that. I can always, if I have a lot of owies, I can just darken or make the line thicker in some other areas. Now, as I'm doing this, I have to be careful I don't go past that. I want to go up to it because it's behind, it's inside the bowl. And this bowl does have a place where it stops and changes direction that's flat, so I don't want to necessarily have it be a continuous curve, but it almost is, because the bottom of the bowl is got a curve to it where it's touching the surface. So I'll do that little line. And then the stripes. And I could paint those on, but let's just be consistent here with the pen line. And it looks like lots of little lines, but I'll just make a skinny one on top, a fat one, fat stripe in the middle, fatter, and then another skinny one on the bottom. Okay, so let's just do a little bit more here. I'll do the baking soda, and I've got it sitting right here, so I'm going to look at it. And from the photo, I can see that it's going to be darker. So the top, the light's hitting it on the top the most from the upper light, so that'll be the lightest. This will be a little darker, and this will be a little lighter than this. So light, lightest, light, and then darker. Vertical, check the side of your paper. Vertical, can always look and make sure it looks like it's matching. And then hiding behind the egg. My daughter Raina and her family, the two little granddaughters, Madeline and Miranda, are so excited. They got baby chicks in the spring, and one of their hens, they have 3, is starting to lay. They all have names. Madeline, especially the younger one, holds them for Bring Your Pet to School Day on the Zoom school. She's holding her chicken, and so I get some interesting videos. Okay, so they're very excited about their first eggs. So I decided I was going to move this over so it wasn't right underneath. So I'm going to put it right here on the sketch. I did move it over and on this. So. Okay, and then same thing with the butter. Vertical, perspective, 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 and then I'll have to look at the butter again and see what it looks like, but I think it said butter. And then here's Bob's Red Mill. Here I'm getting away from all of that straight line stuff. It's kind of nice to have something a little more organic. And if you want to do like a vase with some flowers or some fruit, you'll have some organic. But it might be fun to have at least one man-made object in your kitchen still life. Okay, so here's the bag of chips, chocolate chips. The egg is going to be covering it up a little bit. And maybe we'll see a few little chocolate chips peeking out of here. Now there's some nice shiny things in there. I'm not sure how I'm going to handle that yet, or whether I am. And I kind of like changing that angle a little bit. Okay, so now my thought is, am I going to make that border be ruler straight, or am I going to hand do it so it's sort of this sort of a line? So I'm a little nervous about hand doing it right now, so I think I will use the triangle or a T-square kind of thing, and I'm going to make it approximately the same width here and here. So I'm not going by the tape so much because the tape might be on there crooked. Okay, and I have to be careful because this is breaking the border. I think that's the only thing that is. So I'm pushing against this, then I stop. And then I have to be careful because I might want to have some of the chocolate chips breaking the border. So I'm going to draw it almost to the edge. And here's a little chocolate chip. Here's a little chocolate chip. I should probably look and see what they really look like. I'm sort of doing it from memory, but. And then to get this straight also, I want to go this way and make sure that this is a right angle also. So I'm lining this up. And this is usually where my T-square, my ruler slips, and I get a big, then you have to say, okay, how am I going to fix that? There's always things we can do, but it's not always ideal. So hopefully those will end up looking like chocolate chips instead of something else. So I line this up, or that, and make sure I'm getting that right angle again, and that it's approximately the same width all the way around. Maybe go up just a little bit. Well, except I already went down there. I would like that to... Be careful that your border doesn't kiss the edge, that it goes, if it's breaking the border, let's say, that you have it going through it or a little bit below it. So I may have a bit of a problem here, and I didn't foresee that. So I think I'll do that. And I'm going to bring it up just a little bit. So I may have to deal with that and turn that into a part of a chocolate chip. Let's see here. Problem solved. You can always turn things into a bug or something like that. So I've got a lot of that done right now. I can show some of the wrinkles in this. Okay. Now, before I go in with the watercolor, I'm going to try and erase as much of that graphite as I can. And I still didn't do all the lettering. But I just want to show you that you just want to have it nice and clean. Before you start. Oh, we got to get these little chips. I think we'll all know what these are. Especially if I end up putting chocolate chip cookies there or just emphasize what this is. So I'm getting it as clean as I can. I don't want to erase baking soda and Bob's Red Mill because I still have to draw that in. Butter I can always do later. And I'm using a kneaded eraser, squishy eraser. Actually, I think I'll do this and I'll draw that in afterwards on top of the paint. Now, the other thing is, if you are indoors and something is sitting on a counter or a table, do you want to put a table line? And that's always an issue. What I tell people is to take a string sometimes. Here, I forgot to get a string out, but I have a little wire here for my phone. And you can move it up and down and say, where do I want my table line to be? Or do I even want, is the table line off the page? It's probably better not to do a slanted one. It sort of makes us feel a little off kilter. But you could do a corner. The only thing is you have to be really careful about your perspective if it's on the corner. This will not be a right angle when you're seeing it from back here. It's going to be a wider than right angle. And so it's always safer to do this. Now I don't want it to be right where an important, you don't want it to be kissing there, have that tangent point. It draws too much attention. So you wouldn't want it to be right there on the edge. So maybe halfway through. That's kind of where it is right now, but maybe not that high, maybe right about here. So I could go ahead and put, and it's going to go across and pick up on the other side. So you could put that table line in at some point. And this could indicate the separation between the background and the table in color, if you're going to put color on it. Let me get this a little straighter. So those are the only two places where it's going to show. Now that kind of sets it on the ground. If you put it too high, then you feel like you need to put, that there's something missing, that there should be more stuff. Now it just feels like everything's right. Okay, I'm going to show you just a little bit of watercolor, and then I hope you guys will have fun with this. I've got my little palette here. Maybe I'll go ahead and do the table line here. Okay. So the things like the Bob's Red Mill and the chocolate chip cookies are pretty easy and straightforward. I have my sponge, I have my palette. I'm going to use a little bit of permanent rose here. I'm going to use a bright color. And again, it's so nice, just like in your outdoor still life if you did this before. I like this technique of mixed media here. The pen isn't going anywhere, so you can be a little sloppier with your watercolor. What I'm thinking here is this is white. So if I draw it first, I can go around it, but what I might want to do is use the white pen later. So I think I'll not worry about this and just put this on here. Leaving, I probably should have left some white for sparkles. Then I'll go a little darker down here on the bottom. I'll get a little bit of blue in there and some alizarin crimson to make it just a little bit darker down here because the light isn't hitting it as much. Okay, so I've got some color there, and I'll put some Bob's Red Mill red on there too. Now, if I didn't have this pen drawing, I'd have to be a lot more cautious about where I was putting the paint. But the paint is just a little accent. And then, of course, the Bob's Red Mill, I would go in with a finer brush, a smaller brush, and draw it in and then paint that in. What about the baking soda? It's kind of an off-white, sort of yellowy color. So maybe I'll take some New Gamboge here, which is more of a school bus kind of yellow. And I'll let's kind of draw this. See, that's kind of a fancy little thing. I think I'll make it up, and we'll say and we'll try and pretend it's not the official Sprouts baking soda. We'll just give it a little label there. And so I'll go in, actually, I'm gonna reach here and get a smaller brush. So there's a little bit smaller brush, and I got some owies there. So I'm gonna go in and add yellow. Now, if I don't want it to be a bright yellow, and if I want it to be a little more muted yellow, then I can add the complementary color. So the complementary color of yellow is purple. So if I put blue and, I hope you can see this, blue in my red, I've got a little bit of purple, and I can add a touch of that to the yellow, not a lot, and that will dull it a little bit. A little water in there. Now, I don't know about this. Let's see if I can lift up this red. This is probably where my hand went into it. It's a little harder to lift on hot press paper than cold press. We may have to turn that into some kind of a shadow. Okay, so I've got some colors slapped on there. Now I want to come up with the grays in here. If you think of a cool mud, that would be gray. A warm mud would be brown. So I want to use more blue in my mixture. So blue and orange would make a nice gray, or blue and like an orangey brown. So I'm going to go in with cobalt blue. And that'll be actually a nice accent there too. But, so I'll save that for my stripes. So I want to add a little orange. So I'll go in with Scarlet Lake and yellow. I'll use some of that yellow I have there. Scarlet Lake is like an orangey red. And start adding just a touch of that to the blue. And I'm getting a nice colorful gray then. I should probably test that out. Yeah, I like that. Maybe even go a little bit more blue. There you go. So let's take a look at what I have here. So let me dry this so I don't put my hand in it again. I'm gonna go right up to the edge here, maybe with a smaller brush. Holding it way down low because I want a little more control on this. So I don't go into that white area, and then I can dab into the orange. So as I move around, every so often I'm throwing in a little bit of a different color. And that seems dark, but I don't think it's going to be as dark. And now as I move toward the edge, while it's still wet, I'm going to start to soften this by adding just a little bit more water. So you can see it's darker on that side. Let's go back in with. And almost, we're getting actually a little bit of reflection of that red there from the, At the bottom it's pretty dark too. Now I just want to show you this at first to show you that you don't want to be afraid of going dark. Even though it's a white bowl. Okay, I'm going to go in here. And again, I'm saving the white there. These two white strips. Adding a little orange in there to get it to be not quite so blue, just more of a gray. And then fade it out into the light a little bit more. So I've added more water. And then again in here. I think I'll go right along the rim, or I mean right along that white line, and then come in with just water on the brush and just kind of drag it. Get it on the, this is actually a little bit of a watercolor lesson going on here, but if you're going to use it, you can kind of have some ideas about it. So go a little darker on that. Getting some blossoms there. That's because I went in with a wet brush when it's so dry today with this hot weather. Things are drying faster than I want them to. Okay, so I'm going to blow dry that. I'm going to reach for a smaller brush. Okay, I've got a smaller brush now, and I'm going to get some blue, and I'm going to do this blue line. Hopefully that's so I'm just kind of holding it like a pencil and drawing. Sorry if my head's in the way. Sometimes I gotta really get into the drawing a little bit more. Now I'll put just a little bit of, I don't know yet what color this is going to be, but one thing I'm thinking I might do is make this a fairly dark color back here. And that'll make that ring of white really stand out. And I could just put a little color down in here. I'll use some red and orange and go right here for a cast shadow. And then it might cast up the butter a little bit. The butter would would be yellow. And I'll hit the edge of it to soften that edge a little bit. And let's get, maybe this will help to cover up that little drip I had down there. So I'm getting a little bit of color on. And then as far as the egg, I want to leave a little highlight on there. So here's what I think I'll do. I'll wet it. And then I'm going to take some brownish orange, a little blue in it, again. And I'm just kind of dab along the edge here. Maybe use a little burnt sienna and blue, a little darker. And maybe a little yellow. So by wetting it, I'm leaving a little highlight right in the middle. Put a little more blue in for shadow. So there's my egg. On the butter, and on this is going to be darker, so this is dry enough now. I can go in and darken this side because it's the side away from the light. It's got a little cast shadow. We've got the lightest, the middle, and the darkest, and that would probably have a cast shadow also. And I probably should set it up and really look at what the cast shadow looks like, but I'm just gonna emphasize this cast shadow.